Well, hello and welcome, or welcome back to Read Becca for my weekly catch-up on everything that I've read, everything that I'm currently reading, and everything that I'm looking forward to reading. I did have a good reading week this week, finished several things, and so my currently reading pile that I've been showing off that's been lingering the same books over and over every week, we're working that down. We're gonna finish it off by the end of this month. So, I did finish my ebook advanced reader copy of Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame, Adjei, Brenyah, and I will do a standalone review of it because I really enjoyed this book. It's got a lot to say, a lot of information about the correctional system, and it also is a very action-packed, really propulsive book. I enjoyed it so much, but it is actually out already. I kind of was slow to get going, and that's largely because it is such a harrowing, graphically violent book with a lot of hard-hitting information. So overall, you're kind of following one character in this dystopian near future where the correctional system has kind of slid even further down into the dumps and now is hosting death matches between prisoners who kind of sign their life away for a chance at freedom if they're at the top of these championships, basically. And so these are treated as the worst of the worst criminals that potentially wouldn't be let out otherwise, and they're put in these death matches. And it's a story of character and heart, though, because we're being led toward the humanity of the people behind this. So we do get a whole range of characters, but mainly we're focused on just a few who are actual prisoners who are fighting, or we're following a couple of prisoners as they are sort of pressed toward this from their imprisonment. And I think that's an interesting dynamic, that we do get kind of multiple layers here. But the main character I loved, because we're following this woman from the beginning, from her first battle, as she's sort of figuring things out, and then as she joins, not intentionally joins, but the gangs are put together from their individual prison systems, and so she winds up in a gang of others, and usually these are very contentious groups because they're literally going to be killing each other. And she kind of makes a new dynamic. She forms it into something where outside of the battles, they are supporting each other and they stick with each other. She also forms a romantic relationship with another one of the women who's a fighter, and they become this viral sensation, basically. So we're engaging with these topics of not just the prison system, but also influencers and social media. All of that comes into it, as well as fandoms and sort of the toxic fandom plays in. It's really interesting to see all of those strata of different, the layers of different social commentary throughout this book. So really enjoyed it. Very difficult read though, and yeah, I would highly recommend it. Next, I got one off my currently reading that I was sitting there for so long, since February in fact, and that is Tales from Gavagans Bar by Fletcher, Pratt, and Sprague de Camp. So this is a bind-up of a bunch of short stories. I don't think all of them were published previously, but they were published in Weird Tales, in the Magazine of Science, Fantasy and Science Fiction, over, I think, a period of decades. But this is set in the 1950s and collected and written, I think, over a couple decades past that. So this was not super memorable. It's kind of a 3-star book that you expect to be 3 stars, and you're not mad about it being 3 stars. It was entertaining, but not very memorable. I think that this all follows the same format, and the reason it took me so long to read since February is just because I was reading 1 or 2 stories every week, and they're less than 10 pages. So this is very easy to just keep as a palate cleanser, and that's pretty much what I did. The format of these is all the regulars in the bar sitting around chatting and discussing, and our authors in the foreword mentioned that they were just reporters who were sitting in the back of the bar taking notes of these stories. So these are factual accounts, but of course that's, flavor text, and that made it enjoyable. But the people are jawing at the bar, and then maybe somebody sweeps in and has a crazy story to tell, or someone who is at the bar just chatting falls upon a topic from what they're chatting about something weird that happened to them, maybe a haunted house, or somebody actually went back in time and got stuck, fell in love, and then came back, or We had mythic beasts and creatures, dryads, that sort of thing. I think I said haunted house as well. That happens. Kind of magical items, amulets, or magic charm. There's a great story toward the end where this woman sort of gives something to this tribe of Bushmen, and they reward her with an enchanted item that helps her cook, but her husband doesn't like the new cooking. He doesn't like the really fancy cooking. He likes very plain items, and it causes her and her husband to get into a fight, and that's how she has ended up in the bar. So it's little brief stories like that. They're very quick, easy to read. So I enjoyed it. It's not very going to stick with me at all, but I'm very happy to have read it. The third thing that I read this week was kind of a social academic work, slightly academic, The Flag and the Cross, White Christian Nationalism and the Threat to American Democracy by Philip S. Gorski and Samuel L. Perry. So this was, I think, very good. I don't feel that I learned a ton of new information from it, but I think this is a great presentation of the topic of white Christian nationalism and how that has come to be such a major influence in our society. Like, why did it start? Where are the seeds of that in history? And what does it mean for us today? What does the ideology look like for a person who is white Christian nationalist right now? And I think that's the important takeaway, that this is extremely consumable and an easy primer for someone who's not familiar with that. For me, as someone who kind of came up in an evangelical tradition, there was not really a lot of new information here for me. So I love that this started first by building that foundation that I had already, as I said, coming from evangelical ideology. Like, I knew all of that, and the authors talk through what is the intrinsic story that someone who has come up in that ideology has built internally for themselves that allows them to hold these conflicting ideals of both a Christ and Christian mindset and also this supremacy mindset, which seems to be antithetical. So that internal story is something that's focused on very much at the beginning, and I think laying that groundwork really helps to get into things as this goes further. And as I said, it is kind of academic. There's a lot of references and quite a few charts in here. So the charting, I did have a little issue with that. Some of them are kind of hard to read in the way they're printed here. They're not super clear. But I think overall it gets across the point that there's been sufficient evidence and research done here to show those conflicting ideologies, and that there's a lack of self-awareness for these people that hold that ideology, that the things that they espouse are really at odds. It also goes through debunking some of the myths that are behind the foundations of these ideologies, and I think that's probably the most important part of this book to me, is it going through that. I just loved the way that it kind of the way that it underlined the fact that Jesus, as an individual, as the person of the Bible, was very all-welcoming and all-accepting. Meanwhile, we have white Christian nationalists who are very much espousing an us versus them, or a very othering and exclusive ideology. And how does that come to be? How does the mindset of that play into politics, even more importantly? And how does that affect us nationally in the US? So that was done really well. For me, this is short, so I'm not going to knock it for not expanding immensely on a lot of these topics. I think it's to the point and very effective at what it's getting across. But in the end, it felt a little like they handed us a radioactive pile of poo in the knowledge that this exists, right? And kind of went, well, here you go. Now that you know about this, good luck dealing with it. Because there is, in the language at the end, there's conclusion and where do we go next, that sort of thing, but there's not really any recommendations. There's no actionable steps here. I think the one thing that it called out at the end is kind of how we accomplish living diversely and having a country that can coexist, is the challenge is twofold: to maintain social solidarity and deep diversity, and to sustain civic engagement in a mass democracy. So that's the one actionable thing, I think, but it doesn't actually give us any information about thinking of how we should get there. Or, like, there is no true conclusion to this, and that's kind of the one drawback for me. I wanted to come out of this like, how do we fix it? And this is not that book. So I enjoyed this immensely. I especially like the foreword, which gives us an emotional undertone to the topic. The foreword is written by Jomar Tisby, and he is writing as a person of color in the church, discussing how he felt coming out of the 2016 election, sitting in a church with other Christians that he knew were espousing and supporting ideologies that were separatist or oppressive toward him. And how do you sit next to someone in a pew that you know is thinking that way? So I think that was a really smart choice for the start of the novel, not the novel, for the start of the book, because we do get that emotional underpinning and think in someone's mind that is affected by this. I think that was really the perfect choice for this, because if you're going to have the impact of getting across the facts and the information, that the data, the charts, you kind of need to connect that to a real person and the effects of these mindsets on that person. And I think that was very, very effective. I think the packaging here is something I do have an issue with, because this seems very inflammatory. This looks like it's maybe a pop culture or kind of a hit piece, perhaps. But this is fairly academic work. It is fairly objective as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't really go after white Christian nationalists that much. It does talk about things like terrorism and the growth of white Christian nationalist terrorism and how that ideology has become increasingly explosive in our country. But it does that from a data perspective. And meanwhile, the branding of this and this is an academic press, this is Oxford University Press. The packaging of this is something that I think no one who is in that ideology is ever going to pick up, really, because it does look kind of inflammatory, like a hit piece. So I like this very much. I think it's a great primer, as I said, for someone who really wants to inform themselves on the roots of white Christian nationalism and what it is doing as an ideology to our country. So I think that's highly effective, and a lot of people should pick this up, definitely, if you want to be civically engaged and informed. Lastly, for things I finished, or didn't finish in this case, I have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I read part 1 of this, and I decided to DNF it because I hated it. And that's not too surprising. I really didn't like Adjei, and I DNF'd that as well by the same author. For the same reasons, really. It's a lot of the characterization is just wrong for me. It's overly, deeply dripping sentiment. I don't know if twee is the right word, but it's very full of sentimentality. As far as the plot that I read so far, I think everyone knows generally this is about 2 people who make a video game together, right? And it's historical-ish. It's in the 80s and 90s mostly, apparently. So we're following Sam and Sadie, and they are adults in later university years, I think, or mid-university years in Boston. They go to Harvard and MIT respectively, and Sam's in a train station and sees Sadie across the way. They haven't seen each other in years. So we're getting this reconnection plot because they were kids who found themselves in a circumstance where they came together and got very close for a while, and then they sort of faded apart as friends. And now they're reconnecting. And we get that childhood past. We also jump back and see a little bit of their early university years and kind of how they've gotten to where they are now in their later university years. So that's pretty quickly handled. But in terms of the characterization as we're going through that aspect of their reconnecting, Sadie, I don't mind a character flaw, and these are flawed characters in many ways, but she is just a character that I couldn't get behind because she's very not like other girls, and she thinks women can't be friends because they always fight. I'm not really behind that, but of course it turns out that like every other female character in the book is depicted as just kind of a jerk. But really, Sadie is the jerk here. She's always kind of awful to people, and she makes a lot of problematic choices. Very early on, we find out she is dating her professor, who's this like world-renowned game designer, and he is also married, so she's having an affair with her professor, and that's just kind of yicky. And Sam is, on the other hand, just overly whimsical and a total ray of light cinnamon bun who's too good for this world. And the dynamic between the two of them did not work at all for me. Yeah, I couldn't stand either of them individually or together. Just wasn't great. So I can handle a flawed character, but they're too much. They're too much, and in the wrong ways are they flawed. Like, it's not believable to me. This also is so heavy-handed with the pop culture references. And not only is it heavy-handed, I mean, like, this is probably to Ready Player One level, which I like that book very much. I have a lot of nostalgia for that stuff, and that one works for me where this one didn't. I don't know, I haven't read that one in years. Maybe it wouldn't work for me because that one is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, they're italicized. So all of the pop culture references are italicized. So we get into these litanies of references, and it kind of is like, okay, yeah, weird flex. We know you know what these pop culture references are. So yeah, so we're getting, it's a mix of 80s and 90s because their childhood is in the 80s and they're in university late 90s. And so it's a whole mash of all the pop culture references, not just video games though, everything. It's TV, movies, magazine at one point. So I'll try to show you, but it feels over the top how much that's in there. So didn't really like the way it was written at all in that aspect. So I had major problems with this. There are so many moments that just feel incredibly overwritten, like right at the beginning when they are literally first meeting. Finally, she turned, she scanned the crowd slowly, and when she spotted Sam, the smile spread over her face like a time-lapse video he had once seen in a high school physics class of a rose in bloom. That sentence is twice as long as it needs to be. Like, why are we calling out this time-lapse video from a high school physics class? That's why this book is so chunky, because everything is overwritten. Then, next page, literally, him being his whimsical self. Come on, Sadie, there'll always be another class. How many times can you look at something and know that everyone around you is seeing the same thing, or at very least, that their brains and eyes are responding to the same phenomenon? How much proof do you ever have that we're all in the same world? They're in a train station, and he's trying to convince her to stay and look at the 3D magic eye poster that she claimed to be there looking at. Like, nobody talks like that. It sounds so dumb and ridiculous. I can't take it seriously. It's so bad. There is a moment, or throughout there are moments that left me baffled and annoyed in the text, but brief moment here, just a sentence, that I had to pause for 10 minutes to try and figure out, like, questioning my entire understanding of words here. Because this line is, always remember, mine Sadie, life is very long, unless it is not. Sadie knew this to be a tautology, but it also happened to be true. So it's not great just as a sentence. So over the top and ridiculous. But on top of that, we're talking about a 12, 13-year-old girl. The idea that she knows what a tautology is, number one, ridiculous. These aren't genius kids at any point. It's not, or at least as far as I read, they're not portrayed as geniuses. Maybe later on we find out she's a genius. I don't know. But yeah, the idea that she knows what a tautology is in any form. But beyond that, this is a phrase. This is said verbally. And a verbal tautology is saying the same thing twice. So saying life is long or it's not long is not a verbal tautology. And that's where I got hung up. I was so confused. And then I realized, okay, she's talking about a math logic tautology where it's both X and not X. So it's always true, right? So that made sense. I took logic in college, so that was a little bit of recall. but like for her, this like 12-year-old kid to know what a tautology is and to misconstrue it as the math version, I don't buy it. That's the author like self-inserting knowledge that she wants to sound really like this character to be in the know or super cool, super smart and quirky. And I didn't buy it for the character. For this particular character, I don't see her even as a university student thinking or talking that way. And it made no sense. It's so silly. So it was things like that through the entire 60 pages that I read that just got under my skin. So I couldn't take it and had to give up. So hopefully I am done with this one, but if it does come boomeranging back to me with the BookTube prize, I will read it. I will give it a shot. I was, in fact, at least mildly compelled to read and find out what the game they design is, because they had not even started designing a game at the point that I finished. So everybody seems to talk about that as like them creating this massively popular game. So I'm curious, but not enough to want to read it. The ever so long running currently reading pile is maybe looking a little better. So we still have Babel and Byzantium that have been going for all month. I'm going to really try to focus and finish up Babel in this next week. So we're going to really do some work on that one. That's becoming the priority to get done. So we're chipping away again. The currently reading pile's going. Then started slightly the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna. This is a buddy read that I needed to get to at the end of this month, so that is in progress. And I also have not started, but plan to start this weekend, Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles for Misery May, because this is the miserable pick, and I've been wanting to reread this for a long time. So we're gonna at least start it. I'm not gonna make a ton of progress, but we're gonna start it. So that is it for, I think, the physical books. In audiobooks, I didn't finish anything. I think I'm only 3 chapters from finishing Oleander Sword though, so that has been really close to finishing, and I'm looking forward to finding out how it wraps up. So that will be done, and I don't actually have an ebook on the go since I finished Chain Gang All-Stars, so I'm going to be on the lookout for a new ebook to get started on. So from books to watching stuff, I kind of wrapped up a few things that I had in progress for a long time, and I binge watched one thing, and the one thing was the new season of Queer Eye. I think season 7 came out, and lovely as always. It's such a source of joy, and so I'm sad that I finished it already. But it was a delight to watch. I love being with the Queer Eye guys, and there's such a positive energy wherever they go. I do feel like they avoided conflict maybe in this season a little more than they have in previous seasons, which is probably a good idea considering the state of the world right now. But they've previously really tried to challenge people's preconceptions, and I don't think they tried to do that as much this time around. But then again, as well, it may just be that they've popularized to the point where, you know, everybody that they were going to kind of knew and expected they were coming. It seems like everything seemed like they were very welcomed versus having nominators who were into it while the actual target person was not so behind being around gay people all the time. That has happened before, and they have really kind of formed connections with that person. So this time around, it was very much accepting and welcoming, but I loved seeing all of the heroic stories of the people that they were there to give makeovers, the really great situations where they got these awesome new homes to live in, like nice design, especially as I'm thinking of doing some kitchen design, got some ideas maybe. That was great. So I just loved it. Queer Eye is such a wonderful show, such a wonderful, hopeful, loving show. The other 2 that I finished that I had in progress were Jewish Matchmaking, which was interesting. I liked that it shows a very diverse range of Jewish belief, from being whatever ultra devout to completely secular and just treating it as kind of an ethnic and ritual tradition more so than having it as kind of integral that they be devout. So I thought that was a great portrayal, and having this single matchmaker that works with all of those different levels, even though she is kind of more on the Orthodox end herself, it was really cool. I also finished Dead to Me. I'm assuming this is the actual finish of the show at the end of the current season. So I was sad to see it go. It's such a funny show, and I've enjoyed how quirky it is. I think Will Ferrell is the executive producer, and you can kind of see that style of humor to it. So it's a little over the top and got ridiculous at the end, how many lies they are entangled in, but so funny to watch. My week was fairly low-key. I did start my new D&D campaign that I had mentioned a couple weeks ago that we were kind of getting going. So that happened this week. I was supposed to go to a concert. Steve Ewing of The Urge is kind of a local celebrity person, runs a restaurant, a hot dog shop here locally. And so he's very much a presence, but he was playing a concert, just free concert at the park. I was planning to go because I've never seen him live, and it got rained out. Of course, we got our lovely spring weather, even though it's kind of summer now. We still are having bouts of pouring rain. So unfortunately, what else went on this week? I think one item to mention is a technology glitch, I guess. So I haven't been commenting on a lot of people's videos because of the fact that like something weird happened with my tablet. I don't know if it was the YouTube app or if it was just something on the Fire tablet, but I would launch the app and it would only show the description and comments from the first video I watched. So as I was going through my watch later, it would just every time just pull up the same comments and description. So I couldn't get into anybody's comments as I was going without closing and reopening the app every time. So I just kind of gave up. I was able to hopefully like videos and stuff, but I've been under commenting. So if I missed commenting on your videos, I apologize. I intended to go back and check a couple of them, and I think I forgot to note down some. So sorry, there will be fewer comments than usual. I'm wondering if other people were running into that, because I do feel like I've seen less comments than usual on even big booktubers channels. So I wonder if there was kind of widespread technology issues. What else? I think I was having an interesting realization this week about the political situation. So not to go into politics too much beyond what I already went to in the book earlier, but along with the book, The Flag and the Cross, everything that's going on right now, like it's really blowing me away how much it feels like we are watching a shift of the Overton window, which is like political sentiment in general. We're watching that shift in real time. And I don't know which way it's going to go, but so many big things happened this week in politics. I don't really want to reference any specific political things, but it seems like it could really shift either direction, but we are watching it move. And wherever it settles on, whichever side you're on even, like, that's a fascinating thing. It's very much that sort of the ancient Chinese curse, you will live in interesting times, right? We're in interesting times. It's so fascinating and interesting that what we're seeing happen is going to be major history. So much of the things that are happening politically, the fact that we lived through a pandemic, I mean, regardless of what you feel, what your ideology is, it's an interesting time to be alive, for sure. I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say for the week. That was a real ramble. I didn't mean to get off on that. So anyway, tangents aside, let's go to recommendations. So I have one kind of political recommendation, I guess. Rachel's Reading Nook did a video on book bans and CRT. That seemed to be a presentation that she was giving about the topic. So that was really interesting. Check that one out. Jean's Thoughts used to be Jean's Bookish Thoughts, but now she seems to be more transitioning into video essays a lot. And she did a video essay on Did Women Ruin Everything? And that's about mythology and drawing together these women characters in mythology. And then Happy for Now. I've got a fun one for us from Happy for Now. She gave us a very long list of diverse romance reading recommendations. And that's kind of something I'm always on the lookout for. So really lengthy list of books and authors, both BIPOC and LGBTQ range of authors that you can draw from for romance novels. So really, really looking forward to diving into some of that list because I don't think I have read hardly any of it. And so I think that's it for my week. This has gone on overly long as per usual. So I'll wrap it up there. Thank you all so very much for watching.